Maya Chen stepped into the dojo for the first time on a rainy Tuesday evening, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the sound of students practicing their kicks against heavy bags. The smell of sweat and determination filled the air, mixed with the faint scent of the rubber mats that covered the floor. She clutched her gym bag tighter, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. At 24, Maya had never thrown a real punch in her life. She worked as a graphic designer at a small firm downtown, spending her days hunched over a computer screen, creating logos and advertisements for local businesses. Her world was one of pixels and color palettes, not punches and pain. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed when she was walking home from work late one evening. The man had appeared from nowhere, grabbing her purse and shoving her so hard she fell to the concrete, scraping her palms and knees. As she lay there, stunned and shaking, watching him disappear into the darkness with her bag, Maya felt something she had never experienced before. It wasn't just fear or anger, it was a deep, burning shame that she had been so helpless, so completely unable to defend herself. That night, as she sat in her small apartment treating her wounds, Maya made a decision. She would learn to fight. Not to become some kind of vigilante, but to never again feel the crushing helplessness that had overwhelmed her on that dark street. She spent days researching martial arts schools, reading reviews and watching videos online. Golden Dragon Martial Arts had caught her attention because of their emphasis on practical self-defense for everyday people. The instructor, Master Lu, had been featured in a local newspaper article about teaching martial arts to survivors of violence. It seemed like the perfect fit. But now, standing in the actual dojo, watching advanced students execute perfect spinning kicks and complex grappling sequences, Maya felt like she had wandered into the wrong universe. These people moved with a fluid grace she couldn't imagine ever possessing. Their bodies were weapons, finely tuned and expertly controlled. She was just Maya, who got winded walking up 2 flights of stairs to her apartment. "You must be the new student," a voice said behind her. Maya turned to see a middle-aged Asian man with kind eyes and calloused hands approaching. "I'm Master Lu. You called about joining our beginners program?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Master Lu smiled warmly and gestured toward a group of students who were stretching on the far side of the dojo. "Come, let me introduce you to some of our other beginners. Don't worry, everyone starts somewhere, and this is a safe place to learn." As they walked across the mat, Maya noticed how Master Lu moved with the same fluid grace as his advanced students, but there was something gentle about his presence that put her slightly at ease. He introduced her to several other beginners, an accountant named David who wanted to get in shape, a college student named Sarah who was tired of feeling afraid on campus, and a retired teacher named Mrs. Rodriguez who had always wanted to try martial arts. "Maya will be joining our Tuesday and Thursday beginner classes," Master Lu announced to the group. "I want everyone to help her feel welcome. Remember, we're all here to support each other." The other beginners smiled and nodded, and Maya felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be as terrifying as she had imagined. Maybe she could actually do this. But, as the class progressed, Maya quickly realized that even beginner level was far beyond her current abilities. The basic stance that Master Lu demonstrated looked simple enough, but when Maya tried to replicate it, her legs shook with the effort of maintaining the position. Her balance was non-existent, and she found herself stumbling and falling repeatedly as they practiced basic movements. "It's okay," Master Lu said gently as Maya picked herself up from the mat for the 6th time in 10 minutes. "Your body is learning a new language. Be patient with yourself." But patience was hard to come by when everyone else seemed to be picking up the movements so much faster. Even the other beginners were managing to stay upright while Maya felt like a newborn deer trying to walk for the first time. The worst part came during partner exercises. Master Lu had them practice basic blocking techniques with each other, taking turns throwing slow, controlled punches while their partner practiced deflecting them. Maya was paired with Sarah, the college student, who was encouraging and patient as Maya fumbled through the movements. But, as they switched partners throughout the exercise, Maya found herself working with some of the more advanced students who had been asked to help the beginners. Most were kind and supportive, adjusting their techniques to match Maya's skill level and offering helpful tips. Then, she was paired with Jake Morrison. Jake was in his early 30s, with the build of someone who had been training for years. His muscles were clearly defined under his training shirt, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his physical capabilities. When Master Lu announced the partner rotation that would put Maya with Jake, she saw something flicker in his eyes, a look that made her stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. "Try to keep up," Jake said as they faced each other on the mat. His voice wasn't openly hostile, but there was an edge to it that Maya couldn't ignore. Master Lu had instructed the advanced students to throw their punches at about 20% of normal speed and power, giving the beginners time to practice their blocks. But when Jake threw his first punch toward Maya's face, it came much faster than she expected. She barely managed to get her arm up in time, and the impact of his fist against her forearm sent a shock of pain up to her shoulder. "Too slow," Jake commented. "In a real fight, you'd already be unconscious." Maya tried to focus on the technique Master Lu had shown them, but Jake's punches kept coming faster and harder than they should have. Each impact jarred her body, and she could feel bruises forming on her arms. She looked around desperately, hoping Master Lu would notice, but he was on the other side of the dojo helping another student with their form. "This is pathetic," Jake muttered as Maya failed to block another punch, this one catching her on the shoulder and spinning her around. "Why are you even here? You think learning a few moves is going to help you if someone really wants to hurt you?" The words hit Maya harder than any of his punches. Because deep down, she was asking herself the same question. What was she doing here? She was a graphic designer, not a fighter. The man who had robbed her wouldn't have been intimidated by someone who couldn't even manage a basic block. "Maybe you should stick to something more your speed," Jake continued as they reset for another round. "Like yoga. Or knitting." Maya felt tears threatening to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had come here to become stronger, not to be humiliated by some arrogant bully who got off on making beginners feel small. When Master Lu finally called for the end of partner exercises, Maya's arms were aching and covered with red marks that would definitely be bruises by tomorrow. Jake walked away without a word, not even the cursory bow that was traditional at the end of partner work. Maya made it through the rest of the class in a haze of pain and embarrassment. During the final meditation period, as she sat cross-legged on the mat trying to focus on her breathing, all she could think about was how foolish she had been to think she could do this. After class, as she gathered her things to leave, Master Lu approached her. "How are you feeling? I know the first class can be overwhelming." Maya forced a smile. "It was fine. Just a lot to learn." Master Lu studied her face for a moment, his experienced eyes taking in details that Maya hoped weren't visible. "Maya, learning martial arts is a journey, not a destination. Some days will be harder than others, but every day you show up is a victory." "Thank you, Master Lu," Maya replied, but the words felt hollow. As she walked to her car, Maya wondered if she would actually show up for the next class. Maybe Jake was right. Maybe this wasn't for her. But, as she drove home through the dark streets, passing the very corner where she had been robbed just weeks ago, Maya felt that familiar surge of helplessness and shame. She thought about the feeling of being so completely powerless, so unable to protect herself or fight back. No. She wouldn't let Jake Morrison or anyone else take this away from her. She had come to the dojo for a reason, and one arrogant bully wasn't going to scare her off. She would be back on Thursday, and she would keep coming back until she became the person she needed to be. Maya didn't know it yet, but her decision to continue would set in motion a chain of events that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone at Golden Dragon Martial Arts. Her journey was just beginning, and the real challenges and triumphs lay ahead. As she pulled into her apartment complex parking lot, Maya made a mental note to buy some ice packs. She had a feeling she was going to need them. But she also made another decision: she was going to start researching training techniques and martial arts videos online. If Jake wanted to push her harder than the other beginners, then she would make sure she was ready for him. The rain had stopped, and as Maya walked toward her apartment building, she noticed that her stride was slightly different. Despite the pain and embarrassment of the evening, there was something new in the way she carried herself. It was subtle, just the smallest suggestion of purpose and determination.
Maya Chan was no longer just a victim walking through the darkness.
She was a student of martial arts, a woman on a journey toward strength. And, even though she didn't know it yet, she was about to become something much more powerful than even she could imagine. The story was just beginning, and Maya was ready to write the next chapter.
Maya's alarm went off at 5:30 Thursday morning, 2 hours earlier than usual.
She had spent the previous evening watching martial arts tutorials on YouTube until her eyes burned, taking notes on basic stances and defensive movements. Her arms still ached from Tuesday's training session with Jake, the bruises now a vivid purple-blue that she had to cover with long sleeves at work. She rolled out of bed and onto the floor of her small apartment, attempting the morning exercise routine she had found online. 20 push-ups seemed impossibly difficult. She could barely manage 5 before her arms gave out completely. Her flexibility was non-existent, and even the basic stretches made her muscles scream in protest. But Maya persisted.
If Jake Morrison thought she was going to quit after one humiliating session, he was wrong.
She had never been athletic, had never pushed her body beyond the minimal requirements of daily life, but something had awakened in her during that first class. It wasn't just determination, it was a fierce, burning need to prove to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. At work that day, Maya found it difficult to concentrate on her design projects. Every time she moved her mouse or reached for her coffee cup, her sore muscles reminded her of what she was putting herself through. Her colleague Jennifer noticed her wincing as she stretched.
"Are you okay?"
"You look like you got hit by a truck," Jennifer said, setting down a stack of client files on Maya's desk. "I started taking martial arts classes," Maya replied, immediately feeling foolish for admitting it.
"I'm pretty sore from my first lesson."
Jennifer raised her eyebrows in surprise. Maya was known around the office for being quiet and gentle, someone who apologized for everything and never raised her voice. The idea of her learning to fight seemed absurd.
"That's unexpected," Jennifer said diplomatically. "What made you decide to do that?" Maya hesitated, not wanting to get into the details of her mugging. "I just thought it would be good to learn some self-defense. You know, with everything that's happening in the world."
Jennifer nodded, but Maya could see the skepticism in her eyes. It was the same look she had seen from Jake, the assumption that she was weak, that she wasn't cut out for physical challenges. The look that said she should stick to what she knew, stay in her safe little world of computer screens and client meetings.
That evening, Maya arrived at the dojo 30 minutes early.
She wanted to practice the basic movements she had studied online, to get comfortable with the stances and footwork before the other students arrived.
The dojo was empty except for Master Lu, who was cleaning equipment in the back.
"You're early," he observed, walking over to where Maya was attempting to perfect her fighting stance.
"Eager to learn?"
"I want to be better prepared for tonight," Maya said, adjusting her feet according to the tutorial she had memorized. Master Lu watched her for a moment, then gently corrected her posture. "Your foundation is improving already. But, remember, martial arts is not just about physical technique.
The mind and spirit are equally important." "What do you mean?"
Maya asked, grateful for his patient instruction. "A student who trains only the body becomes rigid, mechanical. A student who trains the mind and spirit along with the body becomes adaptable, creative. They learn to flow like water around obstacles."
Master Lu demonstrated a simple movement, his body moving with effortless grace. "Which type of student do you wish to become?" Maya considered this as other students began arriving for class.
She watched Jake enter with his usual swagger, his eyes immediately finding her and showing that same dismissive expression. But, tonight, Maya felt something different inside herself. Not confidence exactly, but a quiet resolve that hadn't been there before. The class began with the same warm-up exercises as Tuesday, but Maya found herself able to keep up slightly better. Her balance was still poor, and her technique was rough, but she wasn't falling over as much. The other beginners seemed pleased to see her back.
"I wasn't sure you'd return," Sarah admitted during a water break. "Tuesday was pretty intense."
"It was challenging," Maya replied carefully, not wanting to mention her specific problems with Jake.
"But I'm not giving up." When partner practice began, Maya hoped she might be paired with Sarah or one of the other beginners.
But Master Lu had a different plan. He was rotating the advanced students through the beginner group more systematically tonight, and, once again, Maya found herself facing Jake Morrison.
Back for more punishment?
Jake asked with a smirk as they bowed to each other.
This time, Maya didn't look away.
"I'm here to learn," she said simply.
Jake's expression showed surprise at her directness, but it quickly returned to its usual arrogant mask. "Well, let's see if you learned anything since Tuesday."
The exercise was the same as before, practicing blocks against controlled punches. But Jake immediately began throwing his strikes faster and harder than appropriate for a beginner. Maya's newly studied techniques helped her slightly. She managed to deflect a few more punches than she had on Tuesday. But Jake compensated by increasing his speed and power even more.
"Is that the best you can do?"
Jake taunted as one of his punches got through Maya's guard and struck her shoulder.
"Maybe you should try a different hobby.
Like pottery." But this time, Maya didn't feel the crushing shame that had overwhelmed her on Tuesday. Instead, she felt something else building inside her, a cold, controlled anger. Not the explosive rage that would make her sloppy, but a focused determination that seemed to sharpen her awareness. Jake threw another punch, faster than before, aimed at her ribs. But, instead of the fumbling block he expected, Maya's arm moved smoothly to intercept it, deflecting his fist away from her body with surprising effectiveness. For just a moment, Jake's confident expression faltered. "Lucky guess," he muttered, resetting for another attack.
But it wasn't luck, and Maya knew it.
Something was clicking in her mind, the tutorials she had studied combining with her growing understanding of movement and timing. She was still a beginner, still slow and unpolished, but she was learning. Jake's next attack came even faster, a combination of punches designed to overwhelm her defenses. Maya managed to block the first two, but the third caught her on the arm, sending a familiar jolt of pain up to her shoulder. "There's the Maya I remember," Jake said with satisfaction.
"For a second there, I thought you might actually be improving."
Maya reset her stance, breathing deeply as Master Lu had taught them during the meditation portions of class. She could feel the eyes of other students on them, some beginning to notice that Jake was being unnecessarily rough with her. But Master Lu was across the dojo, working with another pair. "Your turn to attack," Jake said, though his tone made it clear he didn't expect much.
Maya had been dreading this moment.
Throwing punches felt completely foreign to her, and she was certain she would look ridiculous. But she remembered one of the videos she had watched, a female instructor explaining that power came not just from arm strength, but from the entire body working together. She threw her first punch, a slow, careful jab aimed at Jake's chest. He deflected it easily, not even bothering to step back. "My grandmother hits harder than that," he said with disgust.
Maya tried again, putting more force behind the punch.
This time Jake had to actually move his arm to block it, though he made it look effortless. "Better, but still pathetic," he commented. Maya felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rising in her cheeks, but she forced herself to focus. She remembered Master Lu's words about flowing like water around obstacles. Maybe she couldn't overpower Jake, but perhaps there were other ways to learn. Her third punch came from a different angle, and though Jake blocked it easily, Maya noticed something. For just a split second, as he moved to intercept her strike, his balance shifted slightly to his left side. It was a tiny detail, probably meaningless, but Maya filed it away in her mind.
"Time to switch partners," Master Lu called out before Jake could make another disparaging comment.
As they bowed to each other to end the exercise, Jake leaned in slightly. "Don't think that little improvement means anything," he said quietly enough that only Maya could hear. "You're still weak, and you always will be. This isn't a place for people like you." Maya met his gaze steadily. "We'll see," she replied. For the rest of the class, Maya found herself paired with more supportive partners. David, the accountant, was encouraging and patient as they practiced basic kicks. Mrs. Rodriguez shared stories of her own struggles with learning new physical skills at her age, making Maya feel less alone in her difficulties. But, throughout the remainder of the session, Maya found herself stealing glances at Jake.
He was working with other advanced students now, and she could see the difference in how he treated them. With his equals, he was respectful, focused, even helpful. His bullying behavior seemed reserved specifically for beginners he deemed unworthy of the dojo.
During the final meditation, Maya closed her eyes and focused on her breathing as Master Lu had taught them. But, instead of emptying her mind, she found herself thinking about what she had learned tonight. Not just the physical techniques, but something more important. She had faced the same humiliation as Tuesday, but this time it hadn't broken her. Instead, it had shown her something about herself. She was stronger than she had realized. Not physically, not yet, but in ways that mattered just as much. She had faced Jake's contempt and come back for more. She had pushed through the pain and embarrassment to keep learning. And, most importantly, she was beginning to understand that strength wasn't just about being able to throw a powerful punch. It was about persistence, about refusing to quit even when everything seemed impossible. After class, as Maya packed her gear, Master Lu approached her again.
"Your improvement from Tuesday to tonight is remarkable," he said.
"You're beginning to understand that martial arts is about much more than physical technique."
"Thank you, Master Lu," Maya replied. "I've been studying at home, trying to understand the movements better." Master Lu nodded approvingly. Self-directed learning shows dedication.
But, remember, the most important battles are often fought within ourselves.
The opponent on the mat is just practice for the real challenges we face in life. As Maya drove home that night, she thought about Master Lu's words.
She was beginning to suspect that her real opponent wasn't Jake Morrison or any external threat. It was the voice inside her head that told her she wasn't strong enough, wasn't brave enough, wasn't worthy enough to succeed. That voice had controlled her for 24 years, keeping her safe but small, protected but powerless. But, now, for the first time, Maya was learning to fight back against it. She pulled into her parking space and sat in her car for a moment, looking at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at her looked different than she had just 2 weeks ago. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a spark of determination that was growing stronger with each passing day. Maya Chen was still a beginner, still struggling with basic techniques, still receiving bruises from arrogant training partners. But she was no longer the helpless victim who had been knocked to the ground on a dark street corner. She was becoming something new, something stronger. And Jake Morrison had no idea what he was helping to create. 3 weeks into her training, Maya had developed a routine that would have seemed impossible to her former self. Every morning at 5:30, she rolled out of bed and spent 40 minutes doing calisthenics and stretching in her small apartment. Her push-up count had increased from 5 to 15, and she could now hold a basic fighting stance for several minutes without her legs shaking. More importantly, she had begun to understand her body in ways she never had before. She could feel the connection between her feet and the ground, the way her core muscles stabilized her movements, the subtle shifts in balance that preceded every technique. It was like learning a new language, but, instead of words and grammar, she was mastering the vocabulary of physical power. At work, her colleagues had begun to notice changes beyond just her improved posture. Maya spoke up more in meetings, offered ideas with greater confidence, and no longer apologized for every minor inconvenience. Jennifer commented that she seemed different, more assertive.
"It's the martial arts," Maya explained during their lunch break. "It's teaching me things I never expected." "Like how to kick people?" Jennifer asked with a laugh.
"Like how to stand my ground," Maya replied, and something in her tone made Jennifer look at her more seriously. The truth was, Maya's newfound confidence was being tested in ways beyond the physical challenges of the dojo. At Golden Dragon Martial Arts, Jake Morrison's behavior toward her had become increasingly aggressive as she continued to show up and slowly improve. What had started as casual bullying had evolved into something more systematic and cruel. Jake seemed to take personal offense at Maya's persistence, as if her very presence challenged some fundamental belief he held about who belonged in his world. During partner exercises, he had begun incorporating techniques that were far beyond beginner level, using Maya as a practice dummy for advanced grappling moves and submission holds. When Master Lu was looking, Jake would demonstrate proper control and technique. But, the moment the instructor's attention was elsewhere, Jake would apply pressure just a little too hard, hold a choke just a little too long, twist a joint just past the point of comfort. "Oops," he would say with false concern as Maya gasped for air after being released from a rear-naked choke that had lasted several seconds too long. "Sorry, I thought you could handle it." Maya had considered speaking to Master Lu about Jake's behavior, but something held her back. Part of it was pride. She didn't want to be seen as a complainer or someone who couldn't handle the rigors of training. But there was something deeper at work as well. She was beginning to understand that this conflict with Jake was about more than just training techniques. It had become a test of everything she was trying to become. The other students had begun to notice the tension between Maya and Jake. Some of the advanced students looked uncomfortable when they witnessed Jake's excessive aggression, but none of them spoke up. There was an unspoken hierarchy in the dojo, and Jake was near the top of it. He had been training for over 5 years and was one of Master Lu's most skilled students. Challenging him would require someone with significant standing in the martial arts community. Maya was just a beginner who had been training for less than a month. But Maya was also discovering resources within herself that she had never accessed before. The meditation portions of class, which had initially seemed like a waste of time, were teaching her to observe her thoughts and emotions without being overwhelmed by them. When Jake applied a painful submission hold, instead of panicking, Maya found herself able to breathe through the discomfort and look for opportunities to escape or defend herself. More importantly, she was beginning to study Jake with the same intensity she brought to her technical training. She watched how he moved, looked for patterns in his attacks, noticed the subtle tells that preceded his most aggressive moments. What she discovered surprised her. Jake Morrison was skilled, but he was also predictable. His superiority complex made him sloppy, overconfident. He had become so accustomed to intimidating beginners that he wasn't prepared for someone who refused to be intimidated. Maya's breakthrough came during a Thursday evening class in her 4th week of training. The night's lesson focused on escape techniques from various holds and grabs. Master Lu had paired the students randomly, and, once again, Maya found herself working with Jake. "Try to grab my wrist," Jake instructed, his tone making it clear he expected this to be another opportunity to demonstrate Maya's helplessness. Maya reached out and grasped his wrist as instructed. Jake immediately twisted his arm in the standard escape technique they had just learned, easily breaking free from her grip. "Your turn," he said, but as Maya extended her wrist toward him, Jake didn't just grab it, he clamped down with crushing force, his fingers digging painfully into the delicate bones of her wrist. "Now try to escape," he said with a cruel smile. Maya attempted the technique Master Lu had demonstrated, but Jake's grip was far too strong and aggressive for a beginner-level exercise. The pressure on her wrist was excruciating, and she could feel the small bones grinding against each other. "Having trouble?" Jake asked, increasing the pressure even more. For a moment, Maya felt the familiar surge of helplessness that had plagued her for so many years. Jake's grip was genuinely painful, and she couldn't see any way to break free using the simple technique they had just learned. But then, something shifted in her mind. Instead of struggling against Jake's grip directly, Maya remembered Master Lu's words about flowing like water around obstacles. She stopped fighting the direction Jake was pulling and, instead moved with it, stepping closer to him and using his own force to unbalance him slightly. Jake's expression showed surprise as Maya's unexpected movement disrupted his stable base. For just a moment, his crushing grip loosened as he tried to regain his balance. Maya didn't waste the opportunity. Using a technique she had seen in one of her online tutorials, not one that had been taught in their beginner class, she twisted her wrist in the opposite direction from Jake's expectation and simultaneously stepped sideways, creating an angle that made his grip mechanically unsustainable. Her wrist popped free from Jake's grasp so suddenly that he stumbled backward, his face showing shock and something that might have been respect. "How did you?" Jake began, but Maya was already resetting for the next repetition. "Lucky guess," she said, using his own words from weeks earlier. For the rest of the exercise, Jake's demeanor changed noticeably. He still applied more pressure than appropriate for beginners, but there was a new wariness in his approach. Maya had shown him that she was not as helpless as he had assumed, and that revelation seemed to have shaken something fundamental in his worldview. But Maya's success also had an unexpected consequence. As word spread among the other students that she had successfully escaped from one of Jake's holds, attitudes toward her began to shift. Some of the advanced students started paying more attention to her progress, offering tips and encouragement. A few even made pointed comments about appropriate training intensity when Jake was within earshot. Jake, meanwhile, seemed to interpret Maya's growing competence as a personal challenge. His behavior toward her became not just aggressive, but actively hostile. He began seeking her out during partner rotations, volunteering to work with her when other advanced students were supposed to help the beginners. During one particularly intense session, Jake introduced a choking technique that was definitely not part of the beginner curriculum. Maya found herself trapped in a rear naked choke, Jake's arm pressing against the arteries in her neck as he whispered instructions that were clearly meant to humiliate rather than educate. "This is what happens to people who don't know their place," he said quietly as Maya struggled to breathe. "You think you're getting stronger, but you're still just a weak little girl playing at being a fighter." Maya's vision began to tunnel as the blood flow to her brain decreased. But, even as consciousness started to slip away, her mind remained clear. She could feel Jake's body position behind her, the placement of his legs, the angle of his grip. And, suddenly, she remembered a counter technique she had seen demonstrated in an advanced video, something that used leverage and timing rather than pure strength. Using what felt like her last conscious moment, Maya drove her elbow backward into Jake's ribs while simultaneously dropping her weight downward and twisting to her left. The combination of movements disrupted Jake's balance and loosened his choke just enough for Maya to gulp in a desperate breath of air. But, more importantly, Jake's forward momentum, combined with Maya's sudden drop in height, sent him tumbling over her shoulder to land hard on the mat in front of her. The sound of Jake hitting the floor was loud enough to draw attention from across the dojo. Master Lu looked over just in time to see Jake scrambling to get back to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "What happened?" Master Lu asked, walking over to where Maya was still catching her breath. "Just practicing escapes," Jake said quickly. "Maya's getting better at the techniques." Master Lu looked between them, his experienced eyes taking in details that weren't immediately obvious. He could see the red marks on Maya's neck where the choke had been applied too tightly, and he could read the tension in both students' body language. "Perhaps we should rotate partners," Master Lu suggested diplomatically. "Maya, why don't you work with David for the rest of the session?" As Maya moved away to join David, she caught Jake's eye. What she saw there was no longer just arrogance and contempt. There was something new, a recognition that she was becoming genuinely dangerous, not because of her physical skills, but because of her unwillingness to accept the role he had assigned to her. Jake Morrison had spent years being the alpha predator in the dojo's beginner classes. He was accustomed to intimidating and controlling students who looked to him for approval and acceptance. But Maya was different. She didn't want his approval, didn't seek his acceptance, and, most threatening of all, she was learning to fight back. That night, as Maya drove home, she could still feel the soreness in her neck from Jake's choke. But she could also feel something else, a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with escaping from his hold. She was beginning to understand that her real victory wasn't physical. It was psychological. Jake had tried to break her spirit, to convince her that she didn't belong in his world of strength and power. But, instead of breaking her, his attacks had forged her into something harder and more resilient than she had ever imagined possible. Maya Chen was no longer the frightened woman who had been knocked to the ground by a purse snatcher. She was becoming a warrior, and Jake Morrison was about to learn that some opponents become more dangerous the harder you try to defeat them. The real test was still coming, but Maya was finally ready for it. The confrontation that would change everything happened on a Tuesday evening in Maya's 6th week of training. She arrived at the dojo to find an unusual buzz of excitement among the students. Master Lu had announced that they would be having a special session focused on stress testing, intense sparring scenarios designed to prepare students for real-world situations where technique might break down under pressure. "Tonight, we discover what you have truly learned," Master Lu explained to the assembled students. "When adrenaline floods your system, when fear clouds your judgment, will your training serve you? This is not about winning or losing. This is about understanding your own capabilities under stress." Maya felt her stomach tighten with nervousness. 6 weeks of training had given her confidence in basic techniques, but the idea of actual sparring still terrified her. She had been improving steadily in controlled partner exercises, but this would be something entirely different.
The advanced students were clearly excited. For them, this represented an opportunity to test themselves against challenging opponents in a supervised environment. But, for the beginners, the prospect was intimidating. Master Lu explained the format. Students would be randomly paired for 3-minute rounds of controlled sparring. The emphasis was on technique, control, and learning, not on domination or victory. Protective gear would be worn, and Master Lu would personally supervise every match to ensure safety. As the random pairings were announced, Maya held her breath. She desperately hoped to be matched with another beginner, someone at her own skill level who would allow for mutual learning rather than one-sided punishment. But the martial arts gods apparently had a sense of dramatic irony.
Maya Chan and Jake Morrison, Master Lu announced. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Around the dojo, other students exchanged glances. Everyone knew about the tension between Maya and Jake, though few understood its true extent. What they did know was that this pairing represented a massive mismatch in skill and experience. Jake's face showed a smile that made Maya's skin crawl. This was what he had been waiting for, an opportunity to humiliate her completely, in front of the entire dojo, with Master Lu's official sanction. This should be interesting, Jake said as they approached the sparring area. Maya tried to calm her racing heart as they put on protective gear. Headguards, padded gloves, chest protectors, all designed to prevent serious injury during training. But Maya suspected that Jake would find ways to hurt her even through the protective equipment. Master Lu called them to the center of the mat. Remember, this is about learning and testing your skills under pressure. I want to see technique, not aggression. Control, not destruction. Begin when you're ready. Maya and Jake touched gloves in the traditional sign of respect, though there was nothing respectful in Jake's eyes. They circled each other warily, and Maya tried to remember everything she had learned over the past 6 weeks. Jake struck first, a quick jab toward Maya's head that she barely managed to deflect. But, instead of the wild, desperate block she might have attempted weeks earlier, Maya's defense was clean and controlled. She had been studying Jake's patterns for weeks, and his opening moves were exactly what she had expected. Jake followed up with a combination of punches, but Maya found herself able to keep up with his rhythm. Her footwork was still clumsy compared to his, but she was moving with purpose, maintaining distance, not allowing him to trap her against the wall of the sparring area. Not bad for a beginner, Jake admitted, but Maya could hear frustration creeping into his voice. He had expected to overwhelm her immediately. Jake escalated his attacks, throwing faster combinations and attempting to take the fight to the ground with grappling techniques. This was where his experience advantage was most pronounced. Ground fighting was complex and dangerous, requiring years of training to master safely. When Jake shot in for a takedown, grabbing Maya around the waist and driving forward with his shoulder, Maya knew she was in serious trouble. His superior strength and wrestling experience made resistance futile through conventional means. But Maya had learned to think creatively. Instead of trying to sprawl backward to defend the takedown, a technique she hadn't mastered, Maya wrapped her arms around Jake's head and fell backward with his momentum, pulling him into what she hoped resembled a guillotine choke position she had seen in advanced videos. The technique was far from perfect, and Jake easily escaped from her loose grip. But the unexpected move had disrupted his takedown attempt and left them both scrambling to regain position. "What the hell was that?" Jake muttered as they separated and reset. Maya didn't answer. She was learning to let her actions speak for themselves. Master Lu was watching their exchange with increasing interest. He could see that while Jake was clearly the superior fighter, Maya was not simply being dominated. She was adapting, learning, finding creative solutions to problems she couldn't solve through conventional means. Jake's frustration was becoming visible to everyone in the dojo. This was supposed to be an easy victory, a chance to publicly demonstrate Maya's inadequacy. Instead, she was making him work harder than expected, forcing him to use techniques beyond the basic level appropriate for sparring with a beginner. "Stop playing games," Jake snapped as they circled each other again.
fight like you mean it." The comment revealed Jake's fundamental misunderstanding of what was happening. He thought Maya was holding back, not trying hard enough. In reality, she was fighting with everything she had, but she was fighting smart rather than just hard. Jake's next assault came with genuine anger behind it. He threw a series of hard punches and kicks that pushed the boundaries of what was appropriate for controlled sparring. Maya absorbed some hits on her protective gear, but she also managed to land a few clean counterattacks of her own. More importantly, Jake's anger was making him sloppy. His combinations were becoming predictable, and his defense was starting to drop as he focused entirely on offense. Maya saw her opportunity when Jake threw a particularly wild haymaker punch that left him momentarily off balance. Using a technique she had drilled hundreds of times in her apartment, Maya stepped inside his guard and delivered a clean uppercut to his midsection. The punch landed cleanly on Jake's solar plexus, just below his protective chest gear. Despite the padding on Maya's gloves, the impact was significant enough to double Jake over, gasping for breath. For a moment, the entire dojo fell silent. Maya Chen, the graphic designer who had been training for 6 weeks, had just landed a clean shot on one of the most experienced students in the school. Jake straightened up slowly, his face red with exertion and embarrassment. But, instead of showing respect for Maya's improvement, his expression darkened with genuine rage. "Lucky shot," he said, loud enough for other students to hear. Master Lu stepped forward. "Excellent technique, Maya. Your timing was perfect." The praise from Master Lu, delivered in front of the entire class, seemed to snap something inside Jake's mind. This wasn't just about training anymore. This was about his entire identity as a martial artist, his position in the dojo hierarchy, his sense of superiority over people he considered inferior. When sparring resumed, Jake abandoned all pretense of controlled training. His attacks became vicious, designed not to test Maya's skills but to hurt her. A knee strike to her ribs that left her gasping. An elbow that found its way past her headgear to connect with her jaw. A takedown that slammed her hard into the mat. Maya found herself in genuine trouble. Jake's assault was beyond her ability to counter, and she was taking real damage despite the protective equipment. But, even as she struggled to defend herself, Maya's mind remained clear. She was learning something crucial about Jake Morrison, something that would prove more valuable than any technique. Jake was a bully, but he was also a coward. His vicious attacks weren't coming from strength, they were coming from fear. Fear that Maya's success diminished his own accomplishments. Fear that if someone like her could succeed in martial arts, then perhaps his own skills weren't as special as he had believed. Most importantly, Jake's emotional state was making him vulnerable. His wild aggression was creating openings that a more skilled opponent could exploit. Maya wasn't skilled enough to capitalize on those openings yet. But she was storing away everything she observed, building a mental database of Jake's weaknesses and psychological triggers that would serve her in the future. The sparring round ended with Jake clearly dominating in terms of points scored and damage inflicted. But, as they removed their protective gear, something in the dynamic between them had fundamentally changed. Maya was hurt, exhausted, and clearly outmatched. But she was still standing, still conscious, still ready to continue training. Jake had thrown everything he had at her, used every advantage of size, strength, and experience, and she had survived. More importantly, Maya had shown the entire dojo that she belonged there. Not because she was skilled, she clearly wasn't, yet, but because she had the heart of a warrior. She was willing to face superior opponents, absorb punishment, and keep learning from every exchange. As the other students prepared for their sparring rounds, Maya noticed subtle changes in how they treated her. The respectful nods, the offers to help adjust her equipment, the genuine interest in her training progress, all signs that she had crossed some invisible threshold in their minds. She was no longer just a beginner who might quit at any moment. She was a martial artist in development, someone worthy of their time and attention. Jake, meanwhile, was discovering that his Pyrrhic victory had cost him something valuable. Several of the other advanced students had watched his behavior with obvious disapproval. Master Lu's expression was unreadable, but Jake could sense that his instructor was re-evaluating him based on what he had witnessed.
Most troubling of all, Jake could see something in Maya's eyes that he had never encountered before in a defeated opponent. She wasn't broken. She wasn't discouraged. If anything, she looked more determined than ever. Jake Morrison had just won a battle, but he was beginning to suspect that he might be losing a war he didn't fully understand.
Maya Chen walked out of the dojo that night with new bruises and a split lip.
But she also walked out with something far more valuable, the knowledge that she could take Jake's worst and keep standing. The student was becoming dangerous, and the teacher was running out of lessons. The end came 3 weeks later, on an evening when Maya arrived at the dojo to find Jake Morrison waiting for her in the parking lot. The setting sun cast long shadows between the cars, and there were no other students around. Class wouldn't start for another 30 minutes.
Jake's body language was different from usual. Gone was the casual arrogance he typically displayed.
Instead, he stood with the focused intensity of someone who had made a decision and was committed to seeing it through, regardless of consequences. "We need to talk," Jake said as Maya approached the dojo entrance.
Maya stopped walking but didn't move closer to him.
3 months of training had taught her to recognize dangerous situations, and everything about this moment felt wrong. Jake's positioning blocked her direct path to the dojo, and his stance suggested he was prepared for confrontation.
"What about?"
Maya asked, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. "About you quitting," Jake replied bluntly. "This fantasy you're living, where you think you can become a real fighter, it's time for it to end."
Maya felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest.
She had known this confrontation was coming ever since their sparring match. Jake's behavior toward her had become increasingly desperate as she continued to improve and gain respect from other students. But she hadn't expected him to corner her outside the dojo, away from Master Lu's supervision.
"I'm not quitting," Maya said simply. Jake's expression hardened. "Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure your time here becomes so miserable that you'll have no choice."
"You've already been trying to do that for months," Maya pointed out.
"It hasn't worked."
"That was just practice," Jake said, taking a step closer.
"I've been going easy on you because Master Lu was watching.
But there are other ways to handle problems like you.
Ways that don't leave marks that can be traced back to training accidents." Maya's training kicked in automatically.
She shifted her weight to her back foot, creating space to retreat or counter as needed.
Her hands moved to a ready position that could quickly transition to either defensive blocks or offensive strikes.
Most importantly, her mind became calm and focused, observing Jake's movement patterns and looking for opportunities. Jake noticed her defensive posture and smiled with genuine malice.
"Look at you, trying to look like a real fighter. Do you have any idea how pathetic that is? You think 3 months of training makes you dangerous? Why don't you find out?" Maya replied.
The words came out of her mouth before she consciously decided to say them, but they felt absolutely right. For 3 months, Jake had bullied her, insulted her, and tried to drive her away from something that had become essential to her sense of identity. She was tired of being defensive, tired of trying to avoid confrontation.
Jake's smile widened. "I was hoping you'd say that."
He moved forward with the confident aggression of someone who had never lost a fight against an inferior opponent. But Maya was no longer the helpless beginner who had stumbled through her first class. 3 months of intensive training, combined with her systematic study of Jake's techniques and weaknesses, had transformed her into something he wasn't prepared for. Jake's opening attack was a straight punch aimed at Maya's face, exactly the technique she had seen him use dozens of times during training. Maya slipped the punch by moving her head just enough to let it pass by her ear, then stepped inside his guard and drove her knee toward his midsection. Jake managed to block the knee strike, but Maya's quick combination had disrupted his rhythm and forced him to react instead of dictate the pace of the fight. For the first time in their relationship, Maya was setting the terms of engagement. "Cute trick," Jake said, but Maya could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. Jake reset and attacked again, this time with a combination of punches designed to overwhelm Maya's defenses.
But Maya had spent months learning to deal with his aggressive style.
Instead of trying to block every strike, she used footwork to stay just outside his range, letting his punches fall short while she looked for counterattack opportunities. When Jake overextended on a particularly hard right cross, Maya was ready. She stepped inside his punch and delivered a clean shot to his ribs, putting her entire body behind the technique just as Master Lu had taught her. The punch landed with a satisfying thud, and Jake gasped as the air was driven from his lungs. But, more than the physical impact, Maya could see that the psychological effect was devastating. Jake Morrison, who had never been challenged by someone he considered inferior, was being outfought by a woman he had spent months trying to humiliate. Jake's response was pure rage. He abandoned all technique and launched himself at Maya with wild swings that had nothing to do with martial arts training. But, his emotional state was exactly what Maya had been waiting for. During their months of training together, Maya had learned that Jake's greatest weakness was his inability to control his emotions under pressure. When things didn't go according to his plan, he became sloppy, predictable, and vulnerable. Maya dodged Jake's wild swings and grabbed his wrist as one punch missed its mark. Using a throw she had practiced hundreds of times in her apartment, Maya pivoted her hips and used Jake's own momentum to send him flying through the air. Jake hit the asphalt of the parking lot hard, his shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. He rolled to his feet quickly, but Maya could see that he was shaken both physically and mentally. "That's impossible," Jake muttered, staring at Maya as if she had transformed into something alien. But Maya understood that this moment had been inevitable from the beginning. Jake's bullying had been based on the assumption that she would remain weak and helpless forever. He had never considered the possibility that his victim might grow stronger, might learn to fight back, might eventually become dangerous enough to challenge him. Jake charged at Maya again, this time attempting a grappling attack. He was bigger and stronger, and if he could get her to the ground, his weight and wrestling experience would give him a decisive advantage. But Maya had been studying grappling techniques with the same intensity she brought to everything else. As Jake shot in for a takedown, Maya sprawled backward and wrapped her arm around his neck in a guillotine choke. This time, her technique was perfect. Jake found himself trapped in a submission hold that cut off the blood flow to his brain. He tried to muscle his way out of the choke, but Maya had positioned herself correctly, using leverage and technique to neutralize his strength advantage. "Tap out," Maya said quietly as Jake's struggles became increasingly desperate. Jake's pride wouldn't let him submit to someone he still thought of as inferior. He continued to fight against the choke, even as his vision began to tunnel and his movements became uncoordinated. Maya held the submission for several more seconds, then released it before Jake lost consciousness completely. She stepped back as Jake collapsed to his knees, gasping for air and trying to regain his bearings. "Next time I won't let go," Maya said, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. Jake looked up at her with an expression she had never seen before. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. For the first time in their relationship, Jake Morrison was seeing Maya Chen as genuinely dangerous. "This isn't over," Jake said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Yes, it is," Maya replied. "Because now you know what I know." "What's that supposed to mean?" Jake asked. Maya looked down at him with something that might have been pity. "You're not as strong as you pretended to be. And I'm not as weak as you needed me to be." Other students began arriving for class, their cars pulling into the parking lot around them. Jake scrambled to his feet and brushed off his clothes, trying to restore some semblance of dignity. But everyone who saw them could read the body language clearly. Jake Morrison, the dojo's alpha predator, had been humbled by Maya Chen, the quiet beginner who had refused to quit. During that night's class, the dynamic between Maya and Jake was completely transformed. Jake barely looked at her, and, when they were partnered for exercises, he was respectful and controlled. The psychological dominance he had held over her for months was completely shattered. Master Lu noticed the change immediately but said nothing. He had been teaching martial arts for over 30 years and had seen this pattern many times before. Bullies like Jake eventually encountered someone who refused to be intimidated, and the result was always the same. True strength was revealed, and false strength was exposed. After class, as students were changing out of their training clothes, Master Lu approached Maya. Your technique has improved remarkably, he said. But, more importantly, your spirit has grown strong. You understand now that martial arts is not about defeating others, it is about conquering your own limitations.
Maya nodded, thinking about the frightened woman who had first walked into this dojo 3 months ago.
That woman had been defined by her helplessness, controlled by her fear, limited by her belief that she was inherently weak.
Now Maya understood that weakness and strength weren't permanent conditions.
They were choices, made fresh every day through actions and decisions. She had chosen to face her fears instead of avoiding them, to persist through difficulty instead of quitting when things became hard, to stand up for herself instead of accepting mistreatment as inevitable. Jake Morrison had intended to break her spirit and drive her away from martial arts. Instead, he had forged her into something harder and more resilient than either of them had imagined possible. As Maya drove home that night, she realized that her journey was just beginning. She had learned to defend herself against bullies and aggressors, but, more importantly, she had learned to believe in her own capability and worth.
Maya Chen was no longer a victim of circumstances.
She was the author of her own story, and she was finally writing chapters worthy of the protagonist she had always had the potential to become. The woman who had been knocked down on a dark street corner had stood back up, learned to fight, and discovered that she had been strong all along. She just hadn't known how to access that strength until someone pushed her hard enough to find it. Jake Morrison thought he had been teaching Maya about her limitations. Instead, he had taught her that she had no limitations except the ones she accepted for herself. And Maya Chen would never accept those limitations again.